Right, Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Simon, I'm really delighted to speak about this book. So we're going to talk about your first novel, The Beast of
Yeah.
Bethulia Park. I'm actually going to ask you to clarify how you pronounce the park. You say it.
I think it's Bethulia. It takes its name from Judith of Bethulia from the Bible. So I just assume that's
Yeah.
how it's pronounced. Perhaps some of your Jewish viewers might be able to help you out.
Yeah, so I said Bethulia, but I'm American now, so
All right.
I've
Okay.
forgotten how to say some of these things. All right, so the Beast of Bethulia Park. Now I'm going to straight off. I'm going to say this is a very surprising book in all the good ways. There's a lot of different genres in here, and there's a lot of uh, plot twists that I was not expecting. Let's first of all talk about the genres. So I've written a review which you have not seen yet. I thought I would not share it with you
Yeah.
until we've done this interview. In the written review, I've said, this is a mystery novel, it's a detective novel, it's an investigative journalist novel. There's a romance in there. There's a lot of genres, and none of those genres would predict where the book is going, which I love about it. How do you think of where to place this in on the shelf?
It's a very good question because it's something I had to ask myself after I wrote it. I mean, I sat down and I wrote it. It must have been I started 5 years ago this month, so it was just after the first lockdown of 2020, and I've been reading fiction all summer, and I was reading bestsellers. This one's recommended from the Sunday Times bestsellers, or this one's the top of the charts and Stones, whatever. And time again, I was coming away thinking I could do better. It sounds awful, but I was thinking about if this is a Sunday, if this is a bestseller, I thought that well, I'm coming away a little bit empty, a little bit disappointed. I was expecting something great, and I thought, well, maybe I should write something, and also a little bit deflated. The themes were a bit hackneyed, a bit trite, a bit right on, and I thought maybe I should sit down and write the sort of book I'd want to read myself. So I wrote the first draft between September 2020 and February the following year. And after I sat down, I thought, well, what do I do next? I thought I'd better find an agent. And when I started to look into agents, the first thing they want to know is what genre is the book? And I didn't really know. Uh, because most people writers go set out with a genre in mind. This is going to be a satire, or this is going to be crime, or something like that, and they know exactly where they want to position it within the market because ultimately, yeah, that's what agents want to know. Is definitely what publishers want to know. And I was a bit stuck. And I thought, well, is it noir? Could it be crime? And I thought, well, it's definitely crime because essentially it's about a quest to unmask an NHS serial killer who's a murderous doctor who kills his sick and elderly patients out of a distorted moral sense. He thinks he's serving the common good. He's doing the NHS, or a state-funded health service, a huge favor by getting rid of these elderly people who he sees um, as voracious consumers of finite resources. I think is how he describes it in the book. So in that sense, if you boiled it right down, you stripped it right back, it's a story about how an NHS nurse with a troubled conscience um, acts as a whistleblower to go to the press and inform a journalist who's interested in this kind of thing. And together they go after this doctor, and in the middle of that they use a quite naive but likable chaplain. The hospital chaplain is caught up. He starts off as the middleman, but then he gets really in deep over his head. And so the story really is about the pursuit of this doctor. But of course there are elements of romance. I think that's important. I don't think crime should exclude romance. I think some of the best crime novels I've read have themes where the characters fall in love. I've read quite a lot of Elmore Leonard when I was on holidays, beachside reads and things like Out of Sight, fantastic stories. They're all crime and they have the romance element. Graham Greene did it with Brighton Rock. There's a love story at the heart of all these books. And as I was writing it, I thought, well, there's an awful lot of death going on because this doctor's gone around whacking his patients left, right, and centre, and the themes are pretty heavy. And I thought it needs something to lighten it. So I'd taken that decision just a couple of chapters in, and that's when I decided that my priest would fall in love with the nurse. So there is romance, but some people I mean, there are bookshops who specialize in romance which have been selling it, but I think it's probably more crime than romance. I think that's really just to do with the characters.
Yeah. So one genre we haven't mentioned yet, it's a spiritual journey. I've described it in the review as a spiritual journey. You might describe it as a religious novel, although I think that would be narrowing its audience too much. Clearly, religion, particularly Catholicism, is central to the priest story and maybe the nurse's story too. So she's kind of a lapsed Catholic. She has regrets and maybe she's rediscovering her religion. There's lots of parallels in the priest's mind between current events and biblical allegories. Um, but he it's not overwhelmingly a religious novel. Another genre I'll mention is it's kind of a political drama too because you are giving insight into the problems with British politics right now, such unaccountable public services, police who do not care for certain crimes, that they do care about other crimes, fashionable crimes, and elder abuse and deaths of elders in hospitals are not top of their list. You know, there's sham inquiries, sham official inquiries into deaths in the novel. There's a lot of commentary on the dysfunction of particularly romantic relationships, but dysfunctional private lives in general, dissatisfying private lives, which circles back to the spirituality of the novel. How conscious were you of the spiritual, religious, political themes when you started out this novel?
Well, well, first of all, I am a Catholic, it's I had well, first of all, yeah, I think I better just go back to the subject matter is I'm also a journalist, and I used to work for the Daily Mail, and I started investigating um, numerous cases of where families were coming forward saying that the loved ones had been killed by medical negligence. And in 2012, I became aware that a neurologist a very senior neurologist in London had blown the whistle on what's called the Liverpool Care Pathway, which is an end of life care protocol. And he was claiming that this particular pathway was being used improperly, and and it starts with a wrongful diagnosis that a patient was dying, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when they withdraw water and fluids. So even if the patient is dying, once they start dehydrating them to death, death follows like night follows day. And lots of people, he's coming across case after case where people, nuisance patients, elderly patients, were being put on this pathway and were dying, and when the families were telling him all the time that they weren't dying, that they'd gone in with minor infections and that kind of thing. And I broke a major story when he spoke to the Royal Society of Medicine in London, and he made the claim that euthanasia, because of this pathway, euthanasia had become the de facto way of dying in the UK. And the Daily Mail ran it as a page lead, and they took it up as a campaign. And for the next 2 years, myself and a colleague called Steve Doughty did an awful lot of investigative journalism, and our campaign resulted in the pathway being abolished. In 2014, it was scrapped. And after that, I continued to work with families. 1,000 families came forward in the end and said that and made complaints. I continued to work with families who said that the pathway had been reinvented in a different guise, and their loved ones were still being killed, and they were going to the police. So I could see what was happening with the when families made a complaint to the police, and how the police responded, and how the coroner's courts behaved, and how doctors behaved. And come lockdown, I had this huge dossier, like 10 years of research, and I wanted to think about writing a book. And I said, I thought to myself, well, why not do this? So that's where the subject material comes from. I knew I had an original story which nobody else could had access to. The best writer in the world who writes crystalline prose did not have this story. So I could. So then, as I sat down and thought about how to write it, and I found myself uh, gravitating naturally to social realism. I wanted to have characters which were identifiable and real, who with real relationships, and of course, you. I set it within a particular time frame as well. So the society in which they live has to be recognizable. This is 2019 on, the late, um, less than 10 years ago. So you can see how people pay, and you've got wet rainbow flags flying outside the hospital, and um, uh, all this. I think there's more kind of social analysis in the second novel, but you can still identify it. It's got the feel of Britain in the early part of the 21st century, and that's deliberate. So then when it comes to the religion, well, if you're going to have a character as a priest, he's got to be seen to behave like a priest. And when you get into his head, you've got to show him thinking like a priest. And so Calvin was the first character I got right, because I'd been to the canonization of St. John Henry Newman I went out for the Catholic Herald. I went to Rome in October 2019, and I came back with this idea of a young priest, a very, very passionate Orthodox priest who's got great faith and really believes it, but of course is like all of us, is still benighted by human weakness. And Calvin, he's like St. Peter when he walks on the water and he loses faith, he dips beneath the waves, and that happens to him. But there's moments of weakness, this chink in the armor, of course, is when he sees this beautiful nurse, and a beauty overpowers him. He doesn't know what to do, and he's in it, and it triggers this internal turmoil. So he doesn't go, right, that's it, tears off this clerical collar and pursues her to the bedroom or anything like that. So the turmoil is within, and he wants to be a priest. He wants to be a good priest, but he's wondering, how am I going to deal with this problem? So that's one of the layers there, where you've got the religion and conscience comes into play. Emerald, the nurse, who said she was a lapsed Catholic, she's very lapsed Catholic. She'd been having an affair with the doctor, and she hadn't been to church since she was a child. But she's moved by her conscience. She sees that she knows what this doctor's doing. She doesn't like him because he's treated her badly when they were having a relationship, and she's motivated partly by vengeance, but partly by a desire to divest herself of the guilt that she feels for being part of, for being silent when she's been watching him get killed. So she decides that she's going to do something about it. And now what this another layer which you might be aware of is, the title gives it away a little bit, is the story is a very oblique retelling of the story of Judith of Bethulia from the Old Testament, where Judith, in the Bible, Judith is this very beautiful Jewish widow who's very wealthy, and who takes it upon herself to kill an Assyrian general called Holofernes, who is dehydrating the Israelis to death. And it follows the story kind of follows that trajectory, where with the evil doctor Klein in the person of Holofernes, and Emerald in the person of Judith, to its conclusion. So that's another layer which is at work as well. So, I mean, what genre is it? It's a difficult question to ask, because you've got all these layers, one on top of another, while all the time I'm trying to create a fast-paced novel. So,
yeah. So let's stay with the spirituality and the religion for a moment. So Father Baines, he's an interesting character. He starts out as this young, handsome, athletic character who has taken a different path to his peer group, and he's quite isolated as a result from his peer group. One of the surprises for me was that he ends up isolated within the church too, because he seems to be doing the right thing. So he's volunteering at the local hospital, and he takes up the challenge to investigate these deaths. But his chain of command, his clerical chain of command, as it were, constrains him. He's making waves, and he is suspended on a false accusation that he's the source of leaked information from that hospital. And then the church never really helps to resolve the detective work or the criminal case or the sins that are committed along the way. Father Baines navigates these things ultimately to his satisfaction, but the church doesn't. And I wonder if you were mindfully, consciously making that distinction between the virtues of the priest versus the church.
Yes, a little bit because Father Baines is he's not the kind of priest Pope Francis would have liked, for example. He's more Pope Benedict's generation, what they call was nicknamed the Ratzinger generation. So I mean, for those of your listeners who know a little bit about church history, we had this Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, and that it was the idea was to throw open the doors of the windows of the church to the modern world, and there's this spirit of aggiornamento, was the Italian word for openness, and since then, it's been like a civil war where the liberals have been battling against the conservatives, and for a long time, uh, uh, the liberals would have wanted to push the church in a completely different direction than it went, but they were held back by John Paul II and then Benedict. Francis was a swing moving to the opposite direction. Leo, who we have now, is probably going to bring some kind of he's going to act as some kind of bridge between the two parties. But so for a long time, the priests in the church were very, very liberal. They were enthusiastic about what was called the spirit of Vatican II. But with Baines, he's like these young people now who we see at political rallies. They're sort of gravitating towards traditional positions, and he's like that within the church. So the older priests would have looked down on him and say, like, what the hell are you up to? This isn't what we do. He's seen as an oddball, and you get a sense of that when he is suspended by the Vicar General. And the Vicar General says to him, you could call yourself radically orthodox. What the hell is that? So he tears a strip of him. So so at that point, Calvin, he's suspended until the police conduct their inquiries, and then he's reinstated with a phone call. He doesn't want the church involved in what's going on because he's very, very conscious that they see him as a bit of a weirdo. So he's quite and all the time at that point anyway, he wants to remove himself, to extract himself from the situation he's involved in, and he makes that quite clear to Emerald. He doesn't want anything more to do with it. Well, of course he can't. He's in it. He's involved in it. But he wants to try as much as possible to not involve the church authorities because he thinks they're going to come down heavy on him because he thinks he's isolated from his peers. He's also isolated from the church to a great extent. He walks. He's motivated by his faith, but it's a kind of what Mother Teresa would have called the darkness of faith, where he's clinging on really by his fingertips to the faith, while all these challenges are, he's made to suffer really in imitation of Christ, and it's only his faith that keeps him going. So it is. I try to make an authentic portrayal of a priest, and one of the things I wanted to do as well is I've been conscious that up until say between 1940s and the film The Exorcist, Hollywood generally had a benign attitude towards the priests. They're usually seen as heroic, not always, but mildly heroic. So you get where angels fear to tread. The priest comes in, they're the good guys. They offer a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of a steer. Then in the 90s, from 1980s onwards, 1990s, they were the bad guys, and all of a sudden, they're the paedophiles, the worst kind of priests. And so most people with the writing about priests these days have them down as some kind of a bogeyman, effectively. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to try and do something different? Write about a young priest who's tries to be good. He doesn't always get it right. He makes a mess of things, but he tries to have this authentic relationship with God and be guided by his faith, in spite of his weaknesses. And I thought, well, that would be something original. I'm not saying the first to do it. I think lots of other people have done it. I'm reading a book at the moment by George Bernanos, a French Catholic writer, and I've only just started, but I think it looks great already. And he was doing that in the 1920s, 1930s, but I don't think it's been done properly for a while.
Yeah. So just to build on something you said there. So you actually incorporate into the novel one of the new post 1990s uh, stereotypes of the priesthood is paedophilia. They're
Yeah.
pedophiles, right? So there's a confrontation between the doctor, the male doctor who is killing people. There's a confrontation between that doctor and the priest, and the doctor says, I bet this guy is a weirdo. He's probably got a house full of 8-year-old boys in
Yeah.
there, and it's thrown. It speaks to the the new context for a priest who is trying to do good is that he's now loaded with all this baggage of the Catholic Church, um, genuine crimes
Yeah.
that all priests now have to live with. They have to live with that suspicion, and it constrains him. It constrains Father Baines. It constrains his freedom of action to do good,
Yeah.
and he actually retreats from the doctor on that occasion. And there are other reasons why he retreats from it. So Father Baines is constrained by the church and by the legacy of pedophilic scandals. I want to segue from that into the morality. So from the religion, the spirituality to the morality tale in the novel,
Yeah.
everybody seems flawed. And I think that's realistic. But they are, in a sense, that they're more than flawed. They're all immoral. I mean, there's a lot of adultery, there's a lot of betrayal
Yeah.
and dishonesty, and even the core detective. So you have the novelty, to pardon the pun, of having three detectives in a sense, amateur sleuths. You've got the priest, you've got the nurse, and you've got the journalist, and they're all cooperating to try to solve this crime or at least bring attention to it. And yet they're not quite honest with each other, and some of them are betraying the cause. Like the journalist ends up sleeping with the doctor,
Yeah.
um, and it's not a flattering portrait of Britain or British society. If people are not acting immorally, they're at least sort of morally lost. So, was that a choice by you?
Well, I mean, you're not the first person to ask me about that. One of the publisher asked me once said to me, said, there's very few characters in this book who are happily married. I said, well, the gangster is, and so and a few others. But in Britain, we have, I mean, the family breakdown since 1990s is off the scale. I mean, it really is. And there's in primary schools, they're full of children from families with various fathers, putative fathers drifting in and out the home. It's not unusual, and also the even if it doesn't go that far, for example, if it ends in abortion, something like that, that's what you don't see. So there's still like this idea of sexual freedom and that people can do what they want when they want, just because it's going to make them feel good. And that's where Jenny the Porter, she falls into that trap. She's not happy in a relationship, and she really fancies a doctor. You know that from the very first page of the novel, and she decides that she's just going to have a good time on that occasion. But Emerald is somebody who's already been there. She's a widow because she's in the character of Judith, and after her husband died, we know that she's had an affair with a married man, and it doesn't make her feel great. She's stepping away from that. She's trying to realize she knows that there's a better life, and that's why she likes Calvin. That's why she's got time for him. She tells Jenny in a conversation, meeting this guy tells me that there's a good life for me out there, that I don't have to live this way. So even though the characters are immoral or a mixture, I think they're actually a mixture of good and evil for the most part. And even where I mean, I've drawn two pretty evil characters in the Murderous Doctors, but even they have redemptive, qualities. They have likable features. They can be funny. They're clever. You see the Klein being a dutiful father as well to his daughters, even though he's doing all kinds behind his family's back. Um, but what I wanted to do is I didn't want to make it totally bleak. I wanted to hold out the hope of redemptive grace. I mean, this is where religion comes back into it, because even though Jenny sins and she's done some bad stuff, and I mean, Emerald's already on a kind of um, moving away from a shameful life, past life. Calvin's struggling to keep a good life. Jenny makes the mistake that is life changing. But in the end, she does the right thing. There is redemption comes into it. She finds the strength and the grace to say, look, I made a mistake. Brush yourself down, get it, and move on. So it's not, these characters aren't lost. They're actually immorally, but they're not lost. The other thing about the doctors, evil doctors, yes, there is 21st century Britain. There's some dysfunction in so many ways, but so many other Western countries, and we have at the moment we've unassisted dying bill going through, and some of the comments that there's a piece today in the New Statesman, for example, which could have been written by Dr. Klein about why we need to get rid of all these old people. Is quite shocking how people seem to have lost a sense of what's good and what's evil. So
Yeah.
that's definitely, I wanted to capture that within the novel, definitely.
So I want to get into the politics
Yeah,
behind the immorality, the institutional immorality, such as ending early, assisted euthanasia.
yeah,
Um, so that there is a political ideology which in the novel and in real life, which is driving these immoral choices by institutions. Before we get there, I just want to segue from the moral novel into this theme of vengeance. So,
yeah,
as I read it, the novel um, is forcing amateur sleuths to solve the crimes or at least bring attention to the crimes because institutions are failing. The hospitals themselves are clearly covering things up. They're not interested. The police are not interested. There's various reasons for that. Politicians are not interested. They have their own um, vicious drivers in all of this, which we'll get to in a moment. So the institutions are failing, and the amateur sleuths are not getting the results that one would expect in a Miss Marple novel, where the
no,
amateur sleuth solves everything and passes it to the police, and the arrest is made, and everything is functional. The institutions are not helping here. So some of the characters, I'm not going to give away whom, some of the characters take the decision to engage effectively in vengeance. So they,
yeah,
for instance, punish murderers with the experience of dehydration.
yeah,
They pass murderers over to gangsters. I hope I'm not giving too much away. So the novel essentially ends with vengeance that is privately administered. They're private choices. These are not judicially sanctioned. They're not clerically sanctioned. These are private decisions. And then vengeance kind of is the answer when institutions don't work, right?
yeah.
Is that how you felt about it?
Well, my guiding light, as I mentioned, that is the story of Judith of Bethulia, and she cuts off. Well, she she tricks Holofernes in the biblical story into believing that she wants to sleep with him, and he's crazy about how beautiful she is, and he can't wait. So he gets himself really drunk, has this big feast, and the idea is that he's going to go back to his boudoir and have the best night of his life. And she cuts his head off with his own sword. And then she takes the head back to the Israelites, and they have this great big party where they put the head on a pole and all this kind of stuff. So the good old stuff from the Old Testament. So Emerald doesn't quite do that. I mean, in an early draft, I did actually have a killing Klein herself, but one or two people read it and said, "Look, you lose all sympathy for her. You can't do that. It's too much." So I thought, well, how would it happen today? So that's where she goes to seek the help of the underworld in getting rid of this chap. What it does is it presents a moral quandary to the reader. It says it doesn't necessarily say that vengeance is the answer. What it does is it poses a question: when is it right to kill a killer? When is it legitimate to take the life of a tyrant? So she knows. I don't want to give too much away that this man is out of control, and she knows the police aren't going to help her, and she knows that all the efforts that or she can that or she, at that point in time she thinks all the efforts to bring this chap to justice, to expose him, to unmask him have failed, and he knows that she's been trying to get him, and she knows he wants revenge on her. So what does she do? She takes action to protect herself and protect the people she loves and to protect everybody else this guy's killing. So she acts like a vigilante, and she takes remedial action. Now, some people would say with good cause that that's uh, immoral and illegal. And of course, had she been happened in real life and the police found out about it, she would undoubtedly have been prosecuted for murder or for an accessory to murder. Um, but but morally, ethically, it's still a grey area. I was editing a piece the other day uh, for Kathy Gingell, and one of the authors, I think it was Francis Pike, was raising that question. I think it was about the Israel's decision to take out the Hamas leadership in Qatar, and he was asking the question, how moral is this? And because he's a historian, he went back through the history and he pointed out that St. Thomas Aquinas, who was a Catholic theologian, had made the case that it is morally licit to kill a tyrant when everything else has failed and you need to protect the people. That I wasn't aware of Aquinas when I wrote that, but that is one of the moral quandaries which arises, which is the heart of the novel. Really, it's there right from the beginning, and it's at the climax, and it's also in the epilogue, because where it's historically bookended. Because we see vigilantes who take action outside of the law to protect themselves and the people they love. Yes. So my point would be that it isn't an invitation to vengeance or suggesting that this is something we should be doing, taking revenge on people. But it just presents, without comment, a situation in which what one particular character, one particular person felt that was the only thing they could do. So it's up to the
Yeah,
readers really to decide whether it's immoral or licit, or to ask the
yeah.
question rather than tell people what they should think.
Right. And I sort of read it that way. And I actually thought it was more topical now in 2025 than probably when you wrote it in 2020, because in 2025 we're talking about Britain's collapse. Its social cohesion is even worse, and people are talking about revolution and civil war on current trajectories. And part of those forecasts is that there'll be more vigilantism. More people will be taking the law into their own hands. And that's partly because institutions are stepping out. They're focusing on the wrong things. The cliche of the police are policing tweets and not
Yeah.
streets, and you surrender the streets to vigilantes. So that's why I thought it was particularly topical.
Yes, well, certainly there is this huge dissatisfaction at the moment. This very this with the governments in particular, and they threw the British people throughout the Tories. They didn't vote for Labour, didn't elect Labour because they wanted a Labour government. They wanted to punish the Tories, and Labour got in by default. So what they've got is something they hate even more than they hate the Tories. They hate the Labour even more, and there's this huge dissatisfaction. Whether that will result in more vigilante style actions, I don't know, because the surveillance we're under at the moment is intense. There are cameras everywhere. Everything's monitored. Everything's watched. People are being sent to jail for what they tweet. It's Big Brother has arrived. So how much vigilante action we're going to actually see? I think minimal. I mean, the protest which culminated in the the Kingdom rally in London on Saturday was I suppose Tommy Robinson was planning that separately, but there was Fly the Flag initiative which started by two people in Birmingham, and all of a sudden there was St. George's crosses, Union Jacks flying everywhere. Nearly every street had them out. And it was a peaceful protest because they knew that they couldn't, there wasn't going to be any rioting, there wasn't going to be any unrest. The people have been jailed just for being there or for commenting on the Southport riots that followed the massacre of three school children the previous summer. But they want to express the dissatisfaction, and they are the public are dissatisfied hugely. But they did so just by flying the national flag. So the British people are generally quite well behaved and polite and well mannered. We're not a bad bunch at all. Um, uh, but I think they're being tested at the moment quite severely.
Yeah. So I think we should mention there's another way in which the novel appears more topical, and that's in the sort of moral revival or and for some people Christian revival in opposition to the consensus, the progressive consensus, the elite.
Yeah,
So for a lot of Christians, they think they need to be more vocal about their Christianity against an Islamophilic slash secular elite. And for some
yeah,
people who are not necessarily want to do this religiously, they want a moral revival against immoral practices such as two-tier justice, two-tier policing. And you see that actually in the Unite the Kingdom protests
yeah,
just last week, where a lot of the protesters voicing a call for a reawakening of
yeah.
Christianity or our traditions, our morals, majoritarianism against elitism. I think that makes your novel topical all over again.
Yeah,
Where
I think you're definitely onto something there. At Easter, we had more people, especially young people, coming into the churches, and not just Catholic churches, the Anglican churches and other churches as well. And we've had for a very, very long time. People are going back to church, and it's not just because they've suddenly discovered God. I think it's because of they don't like what they see. They think there's a better way. So yeah, Calvin Baines is I suppose a an antitype of that person. He's a young chap who's looked around and sees that. Well, he does actually believe quite fervently in God, but he's a convert. He was brought up as an evangelical Anglican. He becomes a Catholic when he's at university, and he wants to evangelize society. So his first meeting with Emerald, well, it's actually the second one. No, actually, it's the third one, because he meets her first of all in the hospital, then the confessional, and then they meet in Liverpool, and they have an honest conversation, and he tells her where he's coming from. It all hangs around this conversation about Imagine, because they're at the Beatles statue in Liverpool, and she says she likes Imagine. He says, "Oh no, I don't like it at all." And then she realizes why, because Imagine there's no heaven and all the rest of it. And he said, "No, it's wrong." And then he explains to her that his own opinions, and he talks about Eleanor Rigby and how the McCartney saw the in his view that how Paul McCartney saw that how religion was disappearing from society to the point that no one was saved. The words from and he said, "Well, I'm here to change that. I'm here for the new evangelization." So he wants to re-Christianize society because he thinks it's going to be a better world. He's full of ideas, full of youthful enthusiasm and zeal, as well as being athletic and good looking. But he's quite clear about where he's coming from.
Yeah, and he's also provoked by Emerald, who is
Yeah,
pretty. She's openly flirting with him, and he is he sort of trips himself into admitting things that he didn't mean to, such as the fact that he finds her beautiful, and then
yeah,
all of this backstory comes out of his mouth with a
yeah.
stranger, which normally he wouldn't. I don't think he would normally divulge.
No.
So it's a neat trick he did there.
So yeah, he's no match for her.
That's right. So listen, there's one thing else that occurred to me about current politics. I realize we're talking about current politics before we get back into the politics of 2020 and the pre-existing hospital death pathway scandals that you talked about earlier. If we think about vigilantism, just to go back to what you were saying earlier, let me ask you this as a journalist who was investigating um, medical euthanasia without a statutory right to do it. As society breaks down, I would think that medical practitioners, doctors, and nurses still have a privilege. In fact, as institutions break down, they probably have more privilege to exercise a form of vigilantism, like hastening people's death,
Yeah.
than the rest of society. So I imagine. So let me turn this into a clearer question. I imagine that we should be concerned that uh, involuntary euthanasia, assisted dying, is still going on, and it actually would be easier to achieve and get away with it as British society institutions collapse.
Yes. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I think it is still going on. I'm still hearing cases, lots and lots of cases all the time. Doctors are telling me that it's still happening. What happened with the Liverpool Care Pathways? The government abolished it, but then they continued to allow other protocols to operate with exactly the same flaws. So the Liverpool Care Pathway, it was almost like the brand was destroyed. The brand was damaged, but so they repackaged the brand and carried on. So they have to be more careful these days. But um, I think if assisted suicide was legalized, I think Britain would follow very the same trajectory as other countries in which euthanasia and assisted suicide have been legalized, but where the safeguards will be swept away very quickly. More and more people would use it. The hospice movement would system, which is very well advanced in Britain, would collapse, and it would soon become euthanasia as people, because the arguments would centre around autonomy, and it would be seen to be cruel to deny one section of the population access to lethal drugs while admitting them for others. So we'd very quickly as we become like Canada, and I think when you've accept that doctors and nurses can take lives, then you're going to have an awful lot of abuses as well. We already have abuses. I think there'll be more.
Yeah.
And the police already are very reluctant to investigate these things. They're very they do. I'm not saying that they never do that. I mean, there are some cases. There was there's a man called Victorino Chu, I think he's a Filipino known as the Stepping Hill Poisoner, and he was killing people in Stepping Hill Hospital in Stockport, and the police, Grace Manchester Police, through every sort of detective in the area, hundreds of officers on the case trying to catch him. They caught him in the end. There's cases in Blackpool recently where nurses were jailed for for drugging patients deliberately, and not to kill them, just because they're annoying them. So they drug them, then they were sending messages over WhatsApp joking about how much soppy clone they'd given them and how they're not going to wake up for a week, and that kind of thing. So these abuses go on. They will investigate. It's just the problem is that the bar is very um, high. Uh, with Klein, who's the doctor in this one, in this particular book, who's the killer doctor. I invented him because I needed a figure. I needed a character to incorporate the real life wickedness and evils that are already happening in British hospitals. And I've shown how the system can, through him, how the system can be exploited to allow doctors and nurses to kill if they want to and get away with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And,
I've since sat down with a senior police officer who I used to go to school with many years ago, and he said that there are other ways that they could do it as well, which you haven't mentioned. But they're aware of. But sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted
yeah, no, I interrupted you, but forgive me. I mean, I wasn't going to mention this, but we should also mention that in case law now, British case law, murder is allowable under certain conditions. So women can now murder their husbands if they can claim coercive control, and that's a low bar. It's not,
you. Yeah,
doesn't have to involve violence. she doesn't have to defend herself against violence. She just needs to say that she's lived a marriage of verbal coercive control, and that has successfully got women off the charge of murder. Notably, this is gendered. Men
Yeah.
have not. So it is gendered, and it is a very low bar to excuse murder. So there is this decline of the sanctity of life, and I don't say that with any religious
Yeah.
drive, but there is a decline of the sanctity of life in British law, criminal law.
Yes. So this will if assisted suicide is legalized, it'll be a new Rubicon which which would have been passed.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's quite frightening, really. I mean, I'd hate to go to hospital. I'd be terrified. But that's what we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all at risk of being arrested for saying these things in case if somebody anonymous can claim to be offended by what
Yeah.
we say. All right, so that's the segue then into the politics of the novel. So it seems clear to me that this novel, and you can correct me, this is my reading of it. This novel is a critique of progressive politics. So there is one point where the Dr. Klein, the male murderer here, he's described by an acquaintance as, quote, enlightened or progressive, like that.
Yeah.
And in the context there is how the journalist is to understand what is motivating Dr. Klein to kill people. He thinks he's actually doing a good thing, as you articulated earlier, that he's helping the NHS, he's shortening the lives of people who are going to die anyway, so let's hasten their death. And the doctor himself describes them as drains on the NHS. There are other characterizations of Dr. Klein as protecting the NHS. He doesn't like, he does like do not resuscitate orders. So he encourages patients to sign do not resuscitate orders. And there's another point where he says he feels powerful. It
Yeah.
made me feel. Oh, actually, I think it is Octavia, his female accomplice, who actually says that. Is that killing people
Yeah.
makes them feel powerful. So they're not just protecting the NHS. There is a selfish, godlike play in their own motivations
Yeah.
too. And then just to complete the political ideological background to these motivations to kill people. The institution, the novel brings out the incentives from national government and local government, the incentives to free up beds by
Yes.
killing people quicker, by getting patients out of hospital so they spend less patient time. That's an objective for the hospitals. Less patient time in hospital often means that people are going home with conditions that are not fully cured. And they're encouraged into cheaper treatments, which has the same result. So it seems that progressive politics is a target of the novel. Was that explicit in your own mind?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I've got to be, a novelist has to be very, very careful, because the market at the moment, or just the reading public as well, we're like I said, we're in a cancel culture, so it's very easy for people just to say, well, I don't like that and throw the book away, or just not buy it, or whatever. So I don't go out of my way to identify a political entity or political movement or anything like that, and then destroy it. But of course, what I do want to do is show that certain trends, which I think are worthy of exposure. And I think the best way to do that, rather than just to talk about issues, is to talk about people. And I think what I tried to do with like I did with Calvin, I kind of reversed the caricature of the priest. I also, what I've done with Klein is turned somebody who would normally be seen by progressive culture as a good guy into the villain. which is a bit mischievous. A lot of people might not like it, but he's the one who's confident. This is his world. He's postmodern man. He's totally at ease in this England of 2019. It's just how he wants it, but no, it's not. It's not actually. He wants it to go much further. He thinks he's riding the wave of the great progressive kind of ascendancy. He's frustrated that people can't recognize his genius and the fact that he's got these great ideas and these philosophies that he wants to bring to fulfillment, and he can't wait for the law on assisted suicide and euthanasia to be changed. And he has this post-coital conversation with his mistress Octavia, in which he expresses these views. And so he kills from a philosophical and moral perspective. He thinks that he is Mr. 21st century, and this is how we do things. And he talks about how mercy needs to be purified for the people of our age. It needs to be we need to give them a mercy they can believe in. So this is a man who has all the answers in his head. He's not killing blindly or killing just out of pleasure, though he does say that it makes him feel powerful. He's killing because he thinks it's what he should do. Because of who he is. It's all about his ego. His ego tells him this is what he should be doing because I am this new man. Octavia is a different creature. She's a psycho, basically. She kills for pleasure. So you got the and every time she kills, she enjoys it. It gives her a rush. She talks about having this scratch that she's got to itch. And so even to you do these. I wrote that. Like I say, must have been it would be the winter of 2021 when I was writing about Octavia and for the first time and really building up Klein's character. And we were in the middle of a lockdown, so it was all from the imagination or from your instinct or whatever. Maybe you just feel it. You can feel it coming out the walls or it's in the air or whatever. But since then, you come across these people. I mean, in Canada in recent times, you've had 3 women doctors who are all carrying out euthanasia, and are all telling now coming out and telling people but every time I take a life, I feel great. It's best thing. It's the most energizing work we've ever done, honestly. And it almost becomes like a vice. This is the killing. They're getting off on taking human lives. The killing makes them feel good. And once you've got people like that in your society, nobody's safe. So what I've done there is offer two types of person, both who are at large in the real world, and if there is a critique of progressive politics, it's wrapped into their characters rather than you're setting up and telling everybody what's wrong with the government. It's the people that you see, that these people that you meet, and you can see it's in their beings.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you. So I'd like to finish off a review by just exploring some ambiguity at the close of the novel. So novels that I like end in a way that that don't close out any subsequent plot. That there is room for the reader to imagine different alternative pathways for these different characters. And what I'm going to dwell on is the relationship between Father Calvin Baines and Emerald, the nurse.
Yeah.
So at the end, he seems to take her on as a housekeeper. Now, there's been the context of this is he's been going back and forth on whether he can have a friendship with a woman that he loves, or he has he's aware of her figure in a carnal way. And at some point, it seems that he says to her, "We can't have a relationship. We can't even be friends because, it's too much." He doesn't phrase it like this, but it's too much temptation. I'm not going to give up the priesthood. I've made my vows. I can imagine having a romantic relationship with you, but I'm going to choose my vows. We can't be friends. And it appears that they separate, but they come back together at the end, and he promises her perfect moderation. He now says perfect moderation is achievable. Earlier in the novel, it seems that he rejected the idea. Perfect moderation is not achievable. Only complete abstinence is achievable. Perfect moderation is is unsustainable. So I think the novel ends with some ambiguity. It's
Yeah.
not clear to me whether their relationship is going to survive in the form that it ends. And you don't have to have an opinion.
Mm.
As a novelist myself, I don't have an opinion about where my characters are going to go.
Yeah.
But did I understand that ambiguity correctly? And
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, the sequel involves the same characters again. We have in Lady Mabel's Gold, which was published in February this year. We bring back Calvin and Emerald and Jenny, Jenny the journalist. And I think once the book had been published, I thought it was a good idea to do a sequel, and I think the sequel's all right. Uh, if I had to put them in the green category, I think the Beast of Bethulia Park would be the novel, and the Lady Mabel's God would be the entertainment. Um, but that, I'm not a screen or anything like that. But I have to say that I'm not 100% satisfied with the ending of the Beast. I think if I'm hoping that eventually I could do a second edition where it ends with Jenny's recovery and stops there. I'd like to take the last chapter out, because you could still have the sequel without having the sentimentality at the end. The sentimentality isn't really my voice. I'd like to remove that.
Oh, I think you're being too harsh on yourself, Simon. Go
Yeah.
on.
Unless you can marry the two.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned Lady Mabel's Goal.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss that next time. I really enjoyed discussing the Beast of Bethulia Park with you, Simon. Well done, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to talk to you today.
Likewise, sir. Thank you.